Welcome to the Bowl Season Stories Podcast, Season 2, Episode 14. I'm Nick Carparelli, the Executive Director of Bowl Season, and today we are joined by front office sports writer Amanda Christovich, former Notre Dame quarterback Brady Quinn, EasyPost Hawai'i Bowl Executive Director Daryl Garvin, and the CEO of University FanCards, Lynn Boggs. Today's show is brought to you by Sport Radar, reimagining immersive experiences for sports fans and bettors. Our first guest is a graduate of Georgetown University and earned her master's degree from the Columbia School of Journalism. She now covers the business side of college sports for front office sports. Please welcome to the show, Amanda Christovich. Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really excited to talk to you today. So many changes on the business side of sports in general, but especially in college sports, so many moving parts. The fans are focused on the wins and losses, but so much has changed in the last 18 months around NIL, coaches' contracts, big buyouts, so much more. How do you keep up with all of that?
Well, I think I'm still trying to figure out the answer to that question of how I keep up with it all. But like I like to say that on the business of college sports beat, there's never a slow news day. Which, is kind of a blessing in disguise. I jumped into this beat, I think week 3 of my job at front office sports was when the Pac-12 and the Big Ten decided that they weren't going to play football because of COVID. If you remember that in 2020, that was week 3.
I remember that very well, unfortunately.
I can imagine. And ever since then, it's just been a whirlwind between that whole COVID season, and then the Alston case, which was the Supreme Court case about how much the NCAA can limit the educational benefits that schools give to players. That was decided in June of 2021. Then the NIL era started pretty much a week and a half later. And I, along with athletes, and I think it's safe to say all athletic department officials who might normally take a break in the summer, maybe go to the beach, did not do that because of the beginning of the NIL era. And then from there, it's been, like you mentioned, ballooning coaches' contracts, talk about congressional intervention. The NCAA has a new constitution. And there are several court cases in the works about, the question of whether or not athletes should be considered employees under the law, how much, if they should be paid, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wake up every morning and just try to cover as much as I can. That's my strategy.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those things a little bit more in a minute, but this show, we have a bowl executive director on each episode, and they love talking about the important relationship between the community and their bowl game. How important is the community aspect of what bowl games do and bring to their home market?
Oh, I think it's everything. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm an East Coaster now, but whether you were a diehard college football fan or you knew literally nothing about football at any level, the Rose Bowl was, a mainstay of just the local sports culture, is I guess the best way to describe it. I think that college football is a very local sport. It's always been a local sport, whether it be regular season or whether it be bowl games. And I've spoken to, on other podcasts, had other conversations about sort of the nationalization of college football, particularly as media contracts precipitate schools, like USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten, for example, right? And creating a cross-country league where, previously it may have been more regional. But I don't think I have to tell you that the regionality of college football and college football fans, whether it be in a big market or a small market, is really sort of like the underpinning of what makes the sport so unique.
I completely agree with you, Amanda. It's, one of my fears, as how you put it, college football becoming more national, is you lose those local rivalries and the bragging rights. I mean, so much of what drives the value in college football is tradition, and we're kind of severing a lot of traditions and rivalries and whatnot. How do you feel that's going to affect the sport from a business standpoint?
From a business standpoint, the money is going to continue to flow in. And the business standpoint, it's funny because it's a lot of things in college sports right now. I feel like are sort of like a chicken and egg question, and I feel personally that the professionalization of college football, the increased media contracts, the revenue is actually what is driving the nationalization of the sport. Because not only has it become clear that that the way that things currently are is extremely lucrative, but they can become even more lucrative, particularly. And again, I just think USC and UCLA, maybe because I'm a Los Angeles native, moving to the Big Ten is such an example of this. I mean, I like the day that happened. I remember my parents, my mother is a diehard UCLA fan, my uncle is a diehard USC fan. So that's a super fun dynamic for us, right? Just being like, what is happening? You know what I mean? I mean, they have decades of history of that rivalry, and the rivalry isn't going away, right? Because like both of the schools are moving to a different conference. But I definitely think it means something different when they're moving to a conference where they're going to be playing in New Jersey, in Ohio, in Michigan. And so I think that regionality probably will continue, right? But I think that the sort of ballooning revenue has really started to push more of an almost like NFL-esque dynamic to Power Five football.
Yeah. Well, one thing we know for sure, it's gonna look very different. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out and whether it works or it doesn't work. I think with any gain comes some loss in some other area. So hopefully it balances out for everybody. We talked about NIL a little bit earlier. When you look at NIL, can you see a world where bowl games can use it to their advantage from year to year?
Absolutely. So the thing about NIL is that um, any sort of third party entity can pay athletes to advertise for them, right? So actually, you saw this last year. There were a couple of in college basketball. So they have those sort of non-conference, they call them MTEs, multi-team events, and those events are often run. Obviously, they're NCAA sanctioned, NCAA schools, right? But they are run by like LLCs or entities that are not the NCAA. And they realize actually we are allowed to pay college athletes to promote this tournament that they themselves will be playing in. And I don't see that bowl game, the sort of legal dynamic in bowl games. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't see how that would be much different. I don't see why we couldn't, have the business entities of bowls, right, that are separate from the NCAA say we're gonna pay athletes to promote us. We're gonna pay athletes to go on social media and talk about the bowls that they're going to play in. So I think that's a huge potential for the future.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There's 42 bowl games there. You mentioned bowl games are different, but then all 42 are also different from each other. But I do think at some level they're all going to have to explore that, and that'll be another interesting thing to follow. I look forward to picking your brain on that as it evolves. One thing we know for sure, college football is very popular. People watch it. This year's regular season, the TV viewership is off the charts. Bowl season viewership last year was up. We across the board, the 42 bowl games. It's amazing how many people watch games. You take the same regular season matchup and you call it a bowl game and play it in December, it gets 2 to 3 times the number of viewers. It's just something special about that bowl moniker. Now we're seeing huge revenue TV deals, as you mentioned earlier, for regular season games. How do you see bowl season fitting into the future of these deals? What kind of value do you think they could command in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the value of all, FBS football is going up. I would argue, and I've done some reporting on this, that college football, that sort of like the rising tide lifts all boats. I know this isn't exactly what you asked, but I did reporting over the summer about like Division II football teams, like commanding, like more than six figures, seven figures in media rights, right? So if the value of Division II football is increasing, I think it's safe to say that the value of postseason FBS football is also going up.
Yep.
And I'm sure, this has been a huge topic of conversation. I think the question that we should be asking, that I guess is going to like answer your question, is how in particular many of these bowl games might play into the expanded college football playoff. Because I know that currently, right, there's a rotation of the New Year's Six with the with the 4-team CFP. So the media rights for the CFP, as we've reported, is going to skyrocket. So then the question becomes, how do the bowl games fit into that? And then for the rest of the bowl games, the question becomes, what is the value? Because to me, the value of the bowl games, maybe in person, is part of the tradition. But I also think that the value of the teams themselves, as that fandom increases, will also relate to future media rights contracts.
Last question for you, Amanda. With everything changing so rapidly in college athletics, what are some of the questions you would have for a bowl game executive director, and what's some of the advice you would give them and how they can evolve to keep up and maybe even enhance what is really a 100-year-old tradition?
As far as advice, I'm not sure how much advice I could give, because I always joke that I actually have the easy job in college sports. I just write about everything that's happening. The rest of you are charged with actually figuring it out. I write about the problems. I don't have to come up with the solutions.
Well, it's great of you to recognize that, Amanda. There are some veteran sports writers that think quite the opposite, just so you know. So don't ever lose that perspective, please.
I'm not saying my job is easy, but I am saying that, like the other day I asked the new Big 12 commissioner, Brett Yormark, he said, what keeps you up at night with regards to your conference, right? He's like, everything keeps me up at night. And I'm like, yeah, I'm, you've got a nice salary, but I can't say I envy that. Anyway, so as far as just the questions that I have, I mean, I think the biggest question that I just personally have is, what are the bowl games going to do to give athletes more than they've previously given them? Because there's, the court of public opinion has really shifted in the last few years about, should athletes be paid or not paid? What should they be given and not given, right? And then there's also been this trend of athletes who, might be NFL draft prospects, sitting there and going, I really want the experience of the bowl game, but what if I get hurt? Do I play? Do I not play? Right? So to me, the question is, what are the bowl games, with their increasing revenue, their increasing, media rights, ticket revenue, everything? What can they give to the athletes? What extra benefits can they provide? And I know that there are conversations about this happening at the CFP level, and there are conversations happening at the conference level. So that would be my main question.
Yep. And that's a good one. I think that's a question we're all asking ourselves at all those levels, bowl games included. And it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. I think you and I would probably agree that something's gonna happen along those lines. It's just a matter of what and how much.
Exactly.
So, well, Amanda, we've taken enough of your time. Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck to you. I'm envious that you're in New York City. It's my favorite city, so enjoy it, and look forward to catching up with you again.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. It was great chatting.
We're going to take a short break and be right back. Stay tuned.
Vapor Apparel has all your game day essentials, from eco-friendly lightweight sun protection shirts and hoodies to cozy joggers and Sherpa fleece pullovers. Vapor has the layers you need to get outside and stay out longer. Plus, as bowl season's official apparel sponsor, they're creating limited edition shirts for bowl-bound teams made with 100% Reprieve fiber from recycled water bottles. Want to celebrate your team's bowl bid with official bowl-bound gear? Get yours and explore more at bowlseason.com.
Welcome back to the show. Our next guest played quarterback at the University of Notre Dame from 2003 to 2006. His 29 career wins as a starting quarterback ranked second in school history. In 2006, he won both the Johnny Unitas Award, given to the nation's top quarterback, as well as the Maxwell Award, given to the best college football player. He was a first-round draft pick of the Cleveland Browns and played 7 years in the NFL for 7 different teams. Please welcome to the show former Notre Dame quarterback and current Fox college football analyst, Brady Quinn. Boy, that was a mouthful. Brady, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be talking some bowl season and bowl games.
Awesome. Well, let's start out with just, being a Division I athlete, at Notre Dame. I mean, being a college quarterback at a top D1 school is a big deal in and of itself, but being the quarterback at Notre Dame is a little different. What was that experience like, and how did you deal with the added pressure of playing that position at that school?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, I grew up obviously in Columbus, Ohio, right outside of Ohio State. And I grew up going to games, tailgating, throwing the football around the parking lot, around the shoe. And I grew up an Ohio State fan, but also had a strong liking of Notre Dame. And, I'd never been there before when I was a young kid, not until I started being recruited by the university. So it was such a contrast of what I grew up around and what I was accustomed to in comparison to like what I was looking for when I ultimately ended up going and decided to go to Notre Dame. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most was just how national Notre Dame is, and not really fully understanding it or realizing it until I got there, and probably not even fully understanding it until I left. And then the reach that the university has, just everything else that comes along with being the quarterback at Notre Dame. But look, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to have basically my choice of, 3 great places between Michigan, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. That was my final 3. And a lot of it was born out of, to me at least, just how good the coaching I received at the youth level into junior high and high school was in the state of Ohio. My uncle would play college ball at Brown. He had a huge impact on that. Obviously, my dad had a huge impact on that, just teaching me how to throw and teaching me how to be a quarterback. But those 2 influences played such a big factor on all that, and really helping to prepare me for what the next step was. I mean, I would challenge, parents out there, younger QBs out there to keep challenging yourself to learn the game. I mean, I remember walking into high school practices, understanding fronts, understanding coverages, all the sorts of things that a lot of guys were just learning at that point in time. And so I think it helped prepare me for, being able to play as a true freshman and playing in every game from our first game in 2003 versus Washington State at home to my final game, playing in the Sugar Bowl versus LSU my senior year. But all that, I think hard work, all that coaching, everything else that I kind of did extra, I think helped put me in the position to be a D1 quarterback and be able to start and play right away.
Now you're an analyst for Fox. You get to see some great games every week. In fact, this past weekend, you were in your hometown to see the Michigan-Ohio State game. 17 million television viewers. I forget how many years. I read something, but it's been a long time since that many people have watched a regular season college football game. Are you enjoying this job, and how differently do you look at the game in this role than you did as a player?
Yeah, 11 years. That's how long it's been since any game on TV has rivaled across any network the audience that was there for the game for Ohio State, Michigan. So pretty incredible. But of course I enjoy it. I mean, it's a ton of fun just to have the ability to stay around the game of football in any capacity, whether that's doing college games and a pregame show for college or calling games for the NFL, which I'll do from time to time. It's obviously a ton of fun to be a part of it. I think the biggest thing for me that I had to learn and I had to adapt to in this career, because I didn't go to school to be a broadcaster. I was a poli-sci and finance major. I'm getting my MBA right now, and everything's more kind of geared towards like business oriented thinking or real estate. And so none of this was really by design. It came after back surgery in my 7th season with the St. Louis Rams at the time. And Jeff Fisher kind of mentioning like, hey, maybe you should look at getting into TV. when you get to the off season, once you recover. And I took that advice and had some opportunities that came from it. And even still, went to training camp with the Dolphins in year 8, but quickly realized like that path of trying to get back out on the field to be a starter was pretty slim. And it was going to take a lot of patience and probably a tougher road. And I had out in front of me this great opportunity with Fox Sports. And so I took that opportunity and kind of ran with it. And even though it was heartbreaking at times, honestly, to be calling NFL games that very season, it still, provided kind of a window into being able to be around the game of football, to be able to still teach people about the game of football, the lessons that you learn, the X's and O's, and have fun while doing it. So I'm having a blast. Like I said, it was never my, plan to be on TV talking football. But I do feel blessed that it's all worked out that way.
You mentioned earlier about, playing youth football and how that prepared you for high school and that prepared you for college. Who is the biggest influence on your life as a young football player, and who, maybe I'm sure there's more than one, who put you in a position to succeed?
Yeah, I think 3 people like early on in my life had a huge impact. And the first was my father, Ty Quinn. He just taught me how to throw. Taught me how to throw anything. At first it was a baseball, then it was a football, but it was like skipping rocks. It was whatever it was. He really is the one who brought me along and kind of taught me that, and would sit there and watch games and take me to games. So he was the first person who really introduced me to it. And then as the gap of my age and my uncle's age, my mom obviously had her youngest brother. He played at Brown. So I remember very, very at a young age going to some of his games out there in Providence. And he then really took me under his wing once he transitioned from playing into the, world of finance. And, he would help, take me, whether it was to get additional coaching or help coach our teams. And, he was one of those bigger, proponents of even taking me with him to scout games. Like I remember being in junior high, instead of hanging out on weekends, I'd go with him for one of his buddies that was coaching and go scout teams and what personnel they're using. What do they do in these situations and, circumstances of the game? And so I was doing that at kind of a young age with him. And so he was kind of that next, big figure in my mind. And then my high school coach, Mark Crabtree, came to Dublin Kaufman back in 2001. He was my head coach for my junior and senior season. And in our first year, we went to the state semis, which was as far as Dublin Kaufman's ever made it to this point in its history, and just had a lot of success with him. And I think, he was able to provide just a lot of great life advice. He's always been someone that I can lean on. He's always been someone that I've reached out to at various points in my life. And so he obviously had a huge impact, just not only coming to Dublin Kaufman, but I think how he continued to shape that program there, which is no longer there now, which is unfortunate. But after a long, successful tenure, I think he left his stamp on that program and obviously on my life as well.
Awesome. Now let's talk bowl games. This podcast is called Bowl Season Stories. You went to 3 of them at Notre Dame: the 2004 Insight Bowl, 2006 Fiesta Bowl, and the 2007 Sugar Bowl, all rewards for a successful season. Yeah. What do you remember about those trips, and what did they mean to you and your teammates?
Well, the first one, to be quite honest with you, we were a 6-5 team. And we got selected to go to the Insight Bowl, but our head coach had just gotten fired, Ty Willingham, and we were at a crossroads. Our team was largely, at least offensively speaking, a lot of young players. My class in particular had a great class. We were sophomores that year. So we won some games we weren't supposed to, beat a top 10 Tennessee team, beat a top 10 Michigan team that year, but then lost some games in the end that we had leads to. BC that year, Pitt that year. If we go 8-3, you're probably telling a different story. Ty Williams probably not fired. And unfortunately, we lost down the stretch in those tight games. So it was a tough year. The reward, in my mind, I think to a lot of us that end up having to decide, like as a team, we voted on whether or not we're going to go play in that bowl game. And, I lobbied our older guys in our program hard, our seniors and our 5th-year seniors, that was important for us, not necessarily for that moment, but for the future of the program, for us to be able to get those additional weeks of practice, for us to be able to get that additional time, together to play together, even though the season didn't turn out how we wanted to. And so we ended up voting, and we went out to the Insight Bowl and, ended up not getting a victory out of it. But I do feel like that whole experience was kind of galvanizing for us as a group, for the success that we would have the following season, winning 9 games, going to a BCS game in the Fiesta Bowl. But it's tough. I mean, we had coaches who are out there, we're out there trying to practice, and meanwhile they're might be a little more preoccupied trying to go find the next job. And so that made it a little bit more difficult. I think we had captain's bed check through some of those nights, and I'm not so sure that actually worked out the way we had hoped. But overall, it was a good experience for us. I think building for the future, being able to have that additional time together, but that additional time to practice and develop. The Fiesta Bowl, so many things stick out about that particular season. For me, having to play a team that I grew up rooting for, right in my backyard there in Columbus, Ohio, it meant a lot for a lot of different reasons. The game obviously didn't turn out the way we had hoped to, but I think for our program to be where we were the year prior, maybe a couple of years prior, to get to that point to be in a BCS game, kind of spoke about the progress that we had made under Charlie Weiss in his first year as head coach. And so that was, it was fun to be back out there in Phoenix. We were familiar with the area, familiar with the environment. Obviously we're able to enjoy into it, not just, playing a big time game like that, but actually able to enjoy ourselves as well, kind of knowing where to go and where we were going to be. And then the next year, obviously we got to a Sugar Bowl, which, that was after Hurricane Katrina. And I think the thing that stood out the most about that game, because, it was close until half, and then we got beat pretty bad in the second half. I had suffered a knee injury in that game. And, given that I was looking at going on the draft after that, it was, obviously kind of scary not knowing like, hey, what's torn, but we knew, something was wrong, and I ended up tearing my PCL. But that week, the thing that stood out the most was going and doing some community service acts in the community, and then seeing how, impacted New Orleans was obviously from Hurricane Katrina, and trying to provide whatever help we could for the period of time we could. But it really left me with kind of the sentiment that, that win for LSU, granted it was like a home game for them, given the crowd and everyone else there, but it was like a little piece of like bringing up the spirit of the folks there in Louisiana, given everything that they had been through. And so that was one particular memory, kind of helping with some of the local schools and so forth, trying to get things back on track. That really stood out.
We talk a lot about how meaningful these bowl game experiences are, especially for the seniors. Even at a school like Notre Dame, you were fortunate enough to go on to the NFL. Some of your teammates did, but still most of them did not. So for many of them, it was their last game. And here you are, you're together as a team, your closest friends in this unique location. How special and how meaningful is that component of bowl games to you?
Oh, I mean, it's what makes it fun, and obviously you go out and you have a great time at a lot of these various venues, and the bowl games, the way they take care of you with the gifts and different things that they provide, it really does feel like a reward when it's all said and done, having the opportunity to be on a national stage like that, to represent your school, to represent your, yourself, your family. It's huge. And honestly, it's a celebration for everyone involved, not just your teammates, even your family getting the chance to come out and kind of celebrate, the season. And I always think back of all the sacrifices that my parents made, and, they made it into a vacation when they would be able to come out to the various bowl games. So there's obviously a ton of work that goes into it. I'm a part of the Orange Bowl committee now. So I see behind the scenes the amount of work that goes into it, and how special they try to make each one of these opportunities. But to me, it's just one of those memorable experiences that, you walk away and you talk to your teammates, after 10, 15 years from being out from all that, and you still remember those fond memories of it.
So people turn on the TV in December, they watch 3 hours of football. What they may or may not know is you've been in that town for 4, 5, 6 days, right? It's a big part of the trip. You've been to 3 bowl games, a lot of activities leading up to the game itself. Any stories that stand out in your mind as memories you'll never forget?
Well, I don't know that I'm at liberty to tell some of the stories.
Tell us the clean ones.
The clean ones, that'd be tough. I guess I'll try to make some of the stories clean if I can. It probably goes back to the first bowl game experience. It was kind of like when your parents first dropped you off at college, and you felt like there was kind of no rules, or you're under your parents' guidance, and so you're kind of out, exploring town and everything else, and just having a good time with your buddies. Some of our players had too much of a good time, and I just remember the first couple of periods of practice, they were just throwing up. They weren't even able to really end up going and doing it. So, I think that first bowl game experience was pretty eye-opening as far as, just the fact that you're kind of able to go out and really enjoy yourselves and, have a good time, especially with your buddies, with your friends. And especially considering the circumstances around the coaching staff. There was a couple nights that I'll probably never forget, just kind of as a team hanging out, having fun together. So I'll kind of leave it at that in regards to that. But the one that stands out, obviously, that most people will probably recall is the Fiesta Bowl. My sister at the time had been dating AJ Hawk, and she had talked to me before the game. She said, "Hey, I had this idea of doing a half jersey." And I said, "Okay." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Isn't blood thicker than water?" Because, I knew her and AJ were pretty serious, and they ended up getting engaged soon after that. But I kind of gave her a hard time about it. But she had the old split jersey. One side was Notre Dame, one side was Ohio State. And she ended up wearing it to that Fiesta Bowl, which, I think she ended up getting more airtime than AJ and I probably combined in that game. We actually played in it. But the infamous half jersey became something that ended up being framed, that I think either my mom has it or she has it somewhere. But that's something that went along with that matchup that probably if you ask someone "Hey, do you remember, the Ohio State Notre Dame Fiesta Bowl with the girl with the half jersey, or Brady Quinn's sister?" That's one of the biggest takeaways from that game. I'm not even sure so many people that watched even know who won that game when it was all said and done.
I had forgotten that, but you jogged my memory on that one. Brady, everybody loves the CFP, including me, but we all know most college football programs can't aspire to make the playoff every year. There's 130 institutions that play football at that level, even on the new format, 12 slots. Teams need postseason opportunities to play. You can't have a system where 12 go to the playoff and, 118 go home.
Right.
To that point, for the people who question the meaning of bowl games and what's the role in all of them, can you imagine a world without bowl games?
I hope not. I'm always a huge advocate for football. I mean, I'll first and foremost say this, that it is a reward. It is a reward to these young men who work extremely hard just for the opportunity to go out there and play the game they love. And I think we sometimes forget that 98% of these young men are not moving on to the NFL. And these bowl games will be some of the last football they ever play. So having the chance to play in those games, having the chance to be rewarded for that, it's huge and it's meaningful. And I think we only tend to focus on the 2%, 1% of guys that either opt out or they might get hurt in the game because they've got aspirations or a future playing in the NFL. That's not the majority of the situations and circumstances that a lot of these guys are faced with. So I always looked at it as a reward. I hate to see guys not participate or not, be a part of something that I think can be so special for them moving forward. Like anything else, football, there's always risks involved. And so you can go and have that conversation. But I think there's something to be said for the reward that comes into play for a lot of those young men. The other thing I'll kind of touch on is it's the developmental sport. There's a lot of players who the additional practices you get leading up to that game, the additional game rep too, becomes meaningful, not only just for the momentum going into the spring, but even spring into that following season and what that could mean for them. So I even think it's meaningful for the development of a lot of those players too, getting more and more reps, more and more live reps too, playing in a game. And so that's another reason why I kind of look at that and say, I think it benefits a lot of teams to have the opportunity to play in those bowl games and build off of that. And maybe it's a springboard for them the following season into that spring or even into the next year.
Last question for you, Brady. You're the son of a Vietnam War veteran. Tell us about the Third and Goal Foundation. It's a charity you founded in 2010 that helps veterans with housing needs. Want to give you an opportunity to talk about what that organization does.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity too, Nick. I really appreciate that. The first thing I just say is some people are always like, why do you name the foundation the name that you name it? Well, had to play for a lot of former New England Patriots coaches, Charlie Weiss, and got drafted with Romeo Crennel and got traded to the Denver Broncos with Josh McDaniels and played for Eric Mangini. And so all these bright minds that came from the New England Patriots organization. And one of the things that they really prioritized was third and goal. Each side of the ball, offense and defensively, had a strategic package that they felt like was pivotal for them executing and winning football games. And it was really that 4-point swing from executing on offense to score a touchdown or defensively executing and being able to get off the field and force a field goal. And that 4-point difference adds up over the course of the 4 quarters. So I really felt like it was an appropriate name for, the work that I was looking at doing with veterans. And, you mentioned my dad, who was a Marine in Vietnam. My grandfather, my dad's side, was in the Army in World War II, and then his father is in World War I. So I come from a lineage of men who have served this country, and it only seemed fitting to me one day after talking to some wounded veterans when I was with the Denver Broncos, and just asking them generally how I could help. And at that point in time, they talked about some of their difficulties adapting back into civilian life. And so I called my dad and I said, hey, I don't know what we can do, but I want to try to find a way of helping. And he said, well, I'm a home builder, and we can remodel a home to make it handicap accessible for those who are coming back who are wounded and need that. And, we can self-fund this and start with just one veteran, move forward. And so that was back starting in 2010. And, now we help over 2,000 veterans every year. We have multiple platforms. We have Operation Home, which is where we, make homes handicap accessible for wounded veterans. We have Operation Education, where we put on educational platforms for those serving in the military who are looking to come back and start, continue, or finish their education. So we've got programs at the University of Notre Dame, the Ohio State University, and the University of Cincinnati. And then we've got Operation Joy, and Operation Joy primarily helps provide unique experiences to military families in need, or just veterans who are in need, and that can encompass holidays and different sporting events, concerts, things of that nature. So it's been 12 years running now. I'm really proud of the work we've been able to accomplish in helping veterans, and so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Congratulations on the work you do there, Brady.
And
thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You got a big game to call this weekend, and I don't know if you're going to be going to any bowl games. I know you're going to be watching them for sure, like everybody else. So really appreciate your time. Hopefully I'll run into you on the road.
Sounds good, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
We're going to take a short break and be right back. Stay with us.
The forecast for this tax season? It's going to rain refunds, lots of refunds. File for less and get more with TaxAct, the official tax filing software of bowl season. Go to taxact.com to get started today.
Welcome back to the show. Our next guest is brought to you by Tapit. Understand how going cashless builds loyalty, engages fans, and boosts your bottom line. We now welcome to the show the executive director of the EasyPost Hawai'i Bowl, Daryl Garvin. Daryl, thanks for joining us.
Aloha. Happy to join. Happy to talk about the EasyPost Hawai'i Bowl.
Well, first off, tell us the story of how a Washington, D.C. native becomes a sergeant in the U.S. Army before settling in Honolulu, Hawaii as a concert events presenter, and eventually becomes the executive director of the Hawai'i Bowl.
So, Nick, that's a 40-year story. So, I'm not sure how detailed you want me to be, but I do remember, and this ties a little bit back to college football. I was watching the 1977 Army-Navy game, and if my memory serves me correct, they did a piece during the game on Army's tight end, Clenny Brundage, going through jump school training over the summer. And just watching him drop from the 250-foot tower with the parachute open and all that, just, that made me say, hey, that's what I want to do. And so I joined the Army and spent 2 years in Fairbanks, Alaska, before going to jump school, and then my last 2 years with the 82nd Airborne Division. After the Army, I was going to school. I got a job working for the late Sam Lahamadou at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C., working on all types of entertainment in the D.C.-Baltimore area, but also up and down the East Coast and throughout the Southeast. And while working at the Warner, I met my future wife, Meijin. She's part Hawaiian. She grew up military, long story short, so we don't go through all 40 years, when she wanted to move home, so to speak. I don't know if you've ever been to Hawaii, but it was not a hard sell for me. So then presenting and producing events, it's not that much different than presenting sporting events. It's selling tickets, it's selling sponsorships, it's meeting the needs of the talent when you're in the entertainment industry, of the teams and the coaches when you're presenting bowl games. Also the ticket buyers, it's the same business, maybe a slightly different product. And I'd gotten to know David Matlin through working on events. And so when he became the executive director of the bowl and had an opening, I applied, lucky enough to get the job. And then when he moved on to be the director of athletics at the University of Hawaii, I ended up in the executive director seat. So that's 40 years in a nutshell.
Well, That pretty impressive, pretty exciting. Can't blame you for being in Hawaii. I have been there once, but that's not enough for sure. Now you've done a little bit of everything. You mentioned, the concert events. You've run an international soccer tournament in Hawaii. Did you always have a passion for putting on events, or is that something you kind of found as your career went along?
Well, first of all, I was lucky enough to be part of a larger group that staged that international soccer tournament here in Honolulu. But yes, for my first taste of the event business, which was selling T-shirts at rock concerts, it gets under your skin. We're very blessed to do what we do and get paid for it. Events are just fun. It's a lot more work than people outside the event business realize as far as hours and time. But when you see the joy in the crowd or the joy in the participants, you just can't help but feel good about what you do.
Unfortunately, the Hawai'i Bowl was canceled the last 2 years due to COVID. How has it changed the way you approach the game this year? And is there a bigger sense of excitement and celebration about its return as a result?
Well, that's a really good question. And it's kind of a hard question because I think that excitement and sense of celebration has to be re-earned. We've been dark for 2 years. We have to come back and deliver those fan experiences and those participant experiences that are under our control and start getting back to where we were pre-COVID.
Now, you've been with the Hawai'i Bowl for more than 13 years now. Prior to the COVID issues, how have you seen the event grow and improve each year?
We've really become a part of so many families across the country of their holiday traditions. The birth of the Hawaiian Airlines Diamond Head Classic basketball tournament's a direct result of the success of the Hawai'i Bowl. Same with the soccer event previously mentioned. Also, when we hosted the Armed Forces Classic here in Honolulu, they're all attributable to the success of the Hawai'i Bowl and the longevity of the game. We're now entering our 21st year. And to give you an example of how things have grown, in 2018, we did our first Extra Yard for Teachers program. We were able to grant $10,000 locally. That grew to $30,000 in 2019. Last year, in 20, we took a COVID break, but in 21, before the game was canceled the night before, we were tracking $24,000, which we were able to distribute after the event. And this year, we've grown that amount to $100,000 that we're going to give back into the community to support teachers, support classroom training, support teacher retention, which is very important here in Hawaii. So, the impact is always growing. We're always looking to increase the impact and just always looking for ways to get better.
Well, to that point, you're also involved in the Hawai'i Bowl Foundation, which helps Hawaii-based nonprofits provide services to area youth. Tell us more about the ways that foundation helps.
So the Hawai'i Bowl Foundation mission is to assist Hawaii-based 501c3 organizations. The foundation developed a giving strategy that revolves around trying to impact as many organizations as possible. Therefore, maybe it's smaller grants to organizations where that smaller grant makes a much larger impact and difference in their budget or their program. Since inception, the foundation's granted over $1.6 million back into the local community. I would venture to guess 2 or 3 times that much, and donated tickets to these organizations so they can attend the games. Again, a preference is given to nonprofits that provide services for Hawaii's youth. So it's kind of just a real feel-good part of the job to help these organizations, especially these smaller grassroots organizations.
Last question for you, Daryl. What did 4 years in the Army do to prepare you for life in the private sector? And how do the lessons that you learned continue to help you today in your leadership role?
So when I was in the Army, luckily, and I'm saying luckily a lot, I guess I've had a lucky life, but it was the peacetime Army. So I'm very, very fortunate there. But I was in the infantry, and they have a saying, pick up your weapon and follow me. And I think that says it all about leadership. You lead by example. You don't ask your staff to do anything you haven't done or wouldn't do. And you try to provide the staff with the tools to succeed on their own so that they have that ability to take over when needed. Kind of follow that principle, lead by example, follow me, and just go from there.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Daryl, we've taken up enough for your time. You're very busy. It's your time of year. It's our time of year, really. Big game coming up, Middle Tennessee versus San Diego State. Thanks for your time. Good luck with your game this year.
Aloha, Nick.
We now welcome to the show the CEO of University FanCards, Lynn Boggs. Lynn, thanks for joining us.
Nick, thanks for having us. We appreciate bowl season having us on.
Each week, we talk to former players and coaches who've played or participated in bowl games. They share their memories of those great experiences and talk about how meaningful they were to them. And one of the more consistent memories that we hear about is the gifts they've received. It's a tradition almost as old as the games themselves. They, 20, 30 years later, they still have these gifts in their cherished possessions. What is it that makes receiving bowl gifts such a memorable part of their experience?
You know, Nick, when I look at it, I kind of look at it from what my experience with bowls and then apply that to players and think, you know, back in time, long time ago, I can remember days of watching bowl games on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day with the family and multiple TVs and having family over and friends over and eating over. And I got to believe the players feel the same way. They grew up watching bowl games and be able to walk away with something that's a memorabilia, a watch that has that logo, a football that brings that back to them. They can stick on their desk. I think it really brings a lot to the player and the opportunity and just brings back history and that whole memory of what goes on at a bowl game.
Now, University FanCards has helped that experience evolve in recent years. Tell me about that and what FanCards is doing in general to help the bowls and the student athletes make this experience better.
Yeah, I think one of the things we looked at is what, you know, we don't want to break up with the history. We want that memorabilia and we want that experience to go home with them. But when you survey the players and what the players are looking for, it's obviously the number one issue they like to have is cash. And you don't want to give cash. There's no memory to that cash. It goes home. So we created a logo-based, custom-branded MasterCard with bowl logos that can be used anywhere in the country. But more importantly, they can be used as an experience while they're there locally, the local culture, spending at restaurants. And then at the end, be able to carry that card back home with them and still have it and use it and share it with friends and family.
Well, I think there's definitely you're helping create a great balance, Lynn, of players having these mementos, but also having some more practical, gift that they can use for pretty much whatever they want. Now I know FanCards is active throughout the intercollegiate sports landscape, not just bowl games. What else are you guys into?
Well, it's interesting, Nick. I'm going to go back to your first question for a second first, because you brought up a good point. They can use this for anything they want to. And when we do look at the data these players are using the cards for, my first thought where I go to all the time is, they want to spend it on the next technology, the next gear and whatever. And when you said that about whatever they want, what we find is they spend it on restaurants, food, local beverages, not on the gear. Only less than 5% of the money on these cards are being spent on technology. So back to that question. But what we do, we have currently 32 plus schools under college branded MasterCard gift cards. We're currently in over 20,000 retailers around the country with our gift cards, Dollar General, Kroger, Walmart, Albertsons, Target, many, many more. So we're all over the country. It's a perfect gift for anyone. If you think about it, if they've got a college they love and you're trying to reach somebody a gift, even the guy that doesn't like that college, give them a gift of that card. It's really a great opportunity to everybody to share in the fandom.
Yeah, you're certainly providing a great service to these bowls, to these student athletes. Something, like I said, something practical in addition to the mementos they receive. Great idea. Thanks for sharing all that with us, Lynn. Appreciate your time and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Nick. We appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you for listening to this week's Bowl Season Stories podcast. Please join us next week when we will welcome another lineup of great guests. If you like the show, we'd appreciate you dropping a 5-star rating for the podcast. And as always, you can follow all the podcast and bowl season news on our website, bowlseason.com, and on social media at Bowl Season. Thanks for listening.